if they don't remember your message, they're not going to remember you because you didn't have the impact that you needed to have.
Welcome to Stand Out, Get Noticed, the podcast that helps you speak and present with rockstar confidence. I'm Christina Canters, your host and founder of The C Method Communication Skills Training. For free resources and to subscribe to the show, visit thecmethod.com. Have you ever watched a speaker on stage and afterwards completely forgot what their key message was? Where you've gone, oh, they were a great speaker. Now let me see, what did they speak about again? Happens to all of us. Now, put yourself in the position of the speaker. You've worked really, really hard to craft an amazing presentation. You've worked on building your confidence, being engaging and sharing stories, and you can do all of these things well. But if your message doesn't come through and your presentation doesn't incite action, then you won't make as powerful an overall impact as you could. And this is what we're talking about today. I'm Christina Canters, here with you for episode 160 of Stand Out, Get Noticed. Now, I have been a bit under the weather recently. You can probably hear it in my voice. I'm at the tail end of a head cold, so I won't speak too much on this episode. I probably sound worse than I actually am, so don't worry too much about me. I'll be fine. Now, joining me this week on the show is the very passionate and energetic Dr. Michelle Mazur. As the founder of Communication Rebel, she helps her clients to find their unique message and to craft their 3-word rebellion, which is what you'll learn. You'll learn more about that in the podcast. She also helps them to create a speech that incites action as well as create their positioning and pricing because, of course, as speakers, we want to get paid. All her clients have a burning desire to make a difference in the world through speaking. And so that's exactly what she helps them to do, which I love. She also has an excellent podcast, the Rebel Speaker Podcast, which I've been really enjoying. So go and subscribe if speaking is something you want to do more of and get paid to do as well. Now, Now, in this conversation, Michelle shares why messaging is so often overlooked by speakers in favor of delivery, as well as why powerful, effective speaking is so much more than simply sharing an idea worth spreading. Here's looking at you, TED Talks, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. We talk about how to create your 3-word rebellion, which is a short phrase that sums up your key messages. I think catch cries like "Make America Great Again," "Start with why," or "Vote yes." Yep, you can create something like this for yourself, and Michelle takes us step by step through this process. So if you want to make a change in the world and get your message out there, or if you're stuck for ideas as to what your message actually is, then this episode is a must listen. Also, get ready for some high energy because both Michelle and I get very excited about this topic. Show notes for this episode will be at thecmethod.com/Michelle. Okay, let's meet the wonderful Dr. Michelle Mazur. Michelle, you're absolutely obsessed with communication. You have a PhD in communication. You've written a book. You have an excellent podcast, the Rebel Speaker Podcast, which I've listened to and I do love. And when you speak on the podcast, you are so passionate and so energized. I can just tell that this is what drives you to get out of bed every morning. Can you tell me, Michelle, where did this obsession come from?
So I've actually been thinking a lot about that lately. And I am one of those lucky people who received their calling like fairly early in life. So I was probably about 15 years old taking my first public speaking class. And to set the picture, at 15, I was awkward. I was shy. I was the super smart girl who sat in the back of the classroom and wouldn't say anything at all. So
that's very hard to believe.
well, honestly, it's because speech and debate changed who I was and how I was showing up. So that's really the power of speaking. So I took this first public speaking class and I was so bad. I was shaking, my knees were knocking, I was sweating, I spit on the boy that I liked. And in the class, I got the gentleman's C, like, you suck, but I don't want to fail you to discourage you. And at the same time where I was struggling so hard with this skill and being visible and speaking my mind, there was this voice in my head that said, this is important. You need to master this. So I joined the speech and debate team because that's what you do when you get a C in your public speaking class. Do it competitively. And
of course,
that's where I really learned the art and science of speaking. And I did my time practicing and getting better and going to tournaments and losing every single weekend to develop my skills. And eventually that led me to this PhD in communication. And I've always just loved communication. I've loved speaking. I love political communication, mass media. So a PhD was this natural step for me to really dive in and understand the theories and understand how people process messages and what's persuasive.
And this thing about messaging, like you talk a lot about messaging, which we will dive deeper into a little bit later, because I know that's what you help people to do now in your business. Before we get into that, can you define what you mean by message?
Yeah, so the message is, well, partially the content that you want to deliver to the audience, but more importantly, it's what you want them to remember. It's what you want them to act on after you speak. Because I've seen so many speakers who they are great on stage and someone will say, oh my gosh, I saw so-and-so and they were so awesome. And then you ask, well, what did they talk about? And they're like, I don't know. And that is the worst case situation, because if they don't remember your message, they're not going to remember you because you didn't have the impact that you needed to have. So your delivery was great, but your message is lost.
Is this something you see in a lot of professional speakers?
I do. That there's so much emphasis on the performance that people are like, oh my gosh, I love this. You're so great. I felt so connected to you. And then the next day, they don't even remember what that person talked about. So especially with motivational and inspirational speakers, that happens so much because motivation and inspiration are fast food and we eat it and then we forget about it a few minutes later.
Yeah. And you've spoken on your podcast about this quite a lot around how simply being inspirational is not enough anymore to get booked or to make your message stick. It has to be actionable. It has to be outcome focused. And because that's what organizations are paying for now. You know, they want to see some ROI on what they're paying you.
Yeah. I believe in inciting action always in your audience. And I think a really great example of this right now is a professional speaker named Mel Robbins. If you haven't heard of her, you should totally check her out, people, because she's amazing. And her whole platform is built on this idea of the 5-second rule. And let me tell you what the 5-second rule is. It's counting backwards from 5 and taking an action. That is her whole speech. It is her whole speaking platform. And you know what? People use it. They tweet about it. They Instagram about it. And her message is spreading. Her career has taken off. And it's not just because she's good on stage, but people are using that super simple message to make change in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of her TED Talks was the first TED Talk I ever saw. And it was around like the F word, like saying you're fine. And she's great. She's so funny. Actually, a question around that, because the 5-second rule, that message of hers came out relatively recently, but she's been speaking for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Can it take, so like how much impact like what difference do you think that's made with her having this 5-second rule message compared to what she had before, which was still really great keynotes, really great messages, but it wasn't distilled into this, this 3-word phrase?
Yeah, I think because it was funny when I first downloaded the 5-second rule, I realized that I read her first book, Stop Saying You're Fine. And that was like years and years ago. And for me, what makes the difference is Stop Saying You're Fine. That's a good title, but it doesn't tell me what to replace it with. It doesn't tell me what the change is. And what I think Mel Robbins has done now with the 5-second rule, in my terminology, she's created this great 3-word rebellion where she's talking about the agent of change. It's so easy to remember the 5-second rule. Mm-hmm. It causes a lot of curiosity because I remember when I first heard about it, I think I saw something on Facebook and I'm like, 5-second rule, what is that? And I Googled it because I was so curious to know more. And so I think she just found the perfect phrase for us to remember the message, to be really curious about the message and find out more. And that's how her career has taken off. And she's become so well known.
And it's so simple as well. And you think, how could it, because there are so many things, like so many people, like I have so many messages I feel that I want to share. And to think about distilling it into 3 words is very overwhelming. And I know this is exactly what you help people to do.
Yes.
So tell me about your key message at the moment.
So my key message is the 3-word rebellion. And probably the subset of that message is incite action always. But how this came about is over Christmas, I had a little bit of a business crisis because I had completed a season of the Rebel Speaker podcast. And I thought, I can't anymore. I can't talk about how to get paid for speaking. I can't talk about selling from the stage. I can't talk about client attraction. I just can't. I'm done. I've done like 80 episodes. I have 300 blog posts. I don't have anything more to say.
So that was more around, sorry, can I just pause you there?
Yeah.
So that was more around the business of speaking and how to get booked.
Yes. Yes. And it's kind of boring. Like, honestly, it's not that hard. So I was finding myself bored and burned out. And I really went back to another great 3-word rebellion, start with why. Like, why did I start this business? And for me, it was because communication changes the world. And so I started going down this rabbit hole of looking at social movements, reading about social movement theory. And I realized that there was a pattern between social movements and these speakers and business owners who were really successful, because social movements have their own 3 words, right? If in the United States, we have the Me Too movement or the Never Again movement for, gun control in the United States, which is ridiculous and a totally different topic. But I noticed that these messages take off, or even something like Black Lives Matter. And then I started looking at, Mel Robbins and Simon Sinek, and I'm like, wow, they have 3 words too. I wonder if we used social movement theory and applied it to speaking, if that would be effective in getting people to their 3-word rebellion. And one of my friends and colleagues, a book coach named Jenny Nash, she was instrumental in helping me distill this idea. And then it became this super simple framework where I started using it with my clients, and I would ask them questions like, what are you rebelling against? What change do you want to create? And I would have them just free write on these questions and then analyze the words. And we were able to very quickly develop some great 3-word rebellions. And I'm like, ooh, I'm onto something here. Like, this is exciting. And as I started talking about it, people were like, ooh, 3-word rebellion. Tell me about that. Tell me more. And it's what I've decided to go all in on, because it blends my love of communication, my love of messaging, my love of politics and social movements into one thing. And for me, it's about, my goal is to launch 1 million rebellions And what I really want to do is help people build a message that is bigger than themselves and bigger than their business.
That's amazing. And I love that you took action. Like you had that crisis and you were like, oh, what am I going to do about it? Because that's a scary time. You're going into the unknown when you make that pivot, and especially like announcing it to your community and your followers and going, this is what I'm all about now. That's a big step. So well done.
Yeah. And it was scary because I'm like, what if I never get a client again? What if I'm bankrupting myself? And honestly, people did unsubscribe because they're not interested in that. They just want to know, how do I get paid? But there are people who are interested in impact and the legacy that they leave and really changing their audience for the better.
So what about if you have multiple things that you speak on? For example, like I deliver workshops and keynotes, but there's a few different ones that I'll deliver, and it's all around, building confidence and communicating more effectively and building strong relationships. But is it possible to have one 3-word rebellion that summarizes all that you do?
I think it is. And I think a really good example of this is someone like Danielle LaPorte, because Danielle LaPorte is known for her desire map, which is a 2-word rebellion, but it still counts. And it's such a unique way to set goals and think about how do you want to feel. And under that umbrella of the desire map and desire, she has created so many different things for her business. She has a book about white hot truth. She has a planner. She has truth bomb cards. So you can find something that is the umbrella that covers what you want to do in your business, because the 3-word rebellion should feel expansive. It should feel like, oh, there's so much more I can do. And yes, I want to be known for this specific thing because that is how you get traction. That's why people are attracted to you. But once they're there, you can start introducing them to other ideas, other concepts, and what else you can do for them.
Yeah, sure. The 3-word rebellion's like the hook that brings people in.
Yeah.
And then that's what you become known for, and that's what helps you to build that brand. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So Michelle, can you share with us, so for someone listening, how can we get started to find our 3-word rebellion?
Yeah.
You mentioned before, what you do with your clients. Would you be able to share a bit about that with us?
Sure, absolutely. And if you want, you can always go. I have I give this framework away for free. It's over at 3wordrebellion.com. But what it takes you through is free writing. So I'm a big believer that our message, the idea that we want to be known for, our 3-word rebellion, already exists. It's out there. We know it's out there, but we are in our own way from finding it. So the process that I take people through is a free writing process. So the prompts that I give are things like, what are you rebelling against? What ticks you off? And sitting down and just writing out all of the things that tick you off, all of the things that you're rebelling against. And honestly, for this, I don't care about your grammar. I don't care about spelling. I'm actually just looking for interesting words and turns of phrase and things that I see you repeating again and again, like looking for the patterns. And then we do the same process for what is the change you want to create? Because if you are rebelling without painting a picture of change, you're just rioting. It's no good. You're not going to get people on board because people want to know, where are we going? What is the change? So there are questions like, what is the change you want to create? I want to live in a world where. And then my favorite question that I ask is, if everyone acted on your message, what would the world be like? And
Oh, that's so good. I
yes,
love that.
I love that question. It's my favorite question. And then what you do is you go through and you're looking for the action verbs, you're looking for nouns that are interesting, turns of phrase, and then you start creating a word bank basically of all of the interesting words that you're finding. And I actually recommend that you do this with someone else because we are way too close to our messages to do this for ourselves. And we discount so much of what we say as not being important. And after you have the word bank, you can start playing. So I have certain creative constraints for the 3-word rebellion. So one is it has to be between 2 to 5 words. So I give you a little wiggle room there. It doesn't necessarily have to be just 3. It needs to be positive to paint that picture of change and tell people where they're headed. And most importantly, that there are 2 different types of 3-word rebellions. There is the battle cry 3-word rebellion, where you're commanding the audience to do something. So a great example is Start with Why, or America, Make America Great Again. Donald Trump's campaign slogan was an awesome battle cry that recruited the right people into what he was doing. And then the second type is naming the change agent. So either you're naming the mechanism that causes the change. So like the 5-second rule is what causes change in other people, or you're talking about the change you want to see created in the world, which is like Black Lives Matter. Like that's naming what the change is at the end of this movement.
In Australia recently, we had a campaign and a vote to legalise same-sex marriage. And so the campaign that was going around was simply vote yes. Like that's all it was. It was just vote yes. And you would see posters up everywhere, and people would wear badges saying I voted yes. So it was all around the yes vote, and that 2-word rebellion even. Very simple, but it worked and it was really catchy, and everyone knows when you say, vote yes or I voted yes, everyone knows what you're talking about.
I love that. Yeah, because our messages don't have to be complex. I think one of the common mistakes we make is thinking that we need to have this like really sexy message. And honestly, like the more straightforward you can be, the more people get it and the more memorable it is, and the more likely it is going to spread and call in the people that you want to be a part of what you're creating.
How many iterations of your 3-word rebellion did you go through until you got to 3-word rebellion?
Oh, wow. So many. I mean, when I started my business, I started first talking about the big idea, which was close to what I was going for, because I was like, oh, the big idea anchors the presentation. It, talks about the change you want to create. It's a way to spread the message. And then everybody started talking about it. And then I started thinking about TED and ideas worth spreading. And I'm like, ooh, ideas just aren't enough anymore. So then when I started going through, like talking with my friend Jenny about this, we came up with the 3-word speech. And I was like, that's better and still not awesome. And then finally I was, sitting on the couch one night and I'm like, oh, my brand, it's Communication Rebel. I should call it the 3-word rebellion. And it just felt so right. And it was magical.
It's amazing when you realize that thing you've been searching for was under your nose the whole time.
I know. And honestly, that is what I see for my clients again and again and again, that their 3-word rebellion is something they always say, or it's buried in their free writing, like in some run-on sentence, and they just don't see it, or they think, oh, well, everybody knows that, or, oh, it's just not important. And it's like, no, everybody doesn't know that. And yes, it is important. This is what your people need from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's so good. Can you give an example of a 3-word rebellion that one of your clients has, whether you've helped your client come up with?
Sure. So one of my clients, her name is Ime Hisu, and she has over 300 food allergies, which is,
Oh my
I
God.
know, like, what does she eat? She basically eats like bacon, meat, and vegetables, and that's about it. And when she was first navigating her food allergy journey, there was no good information to help her do this successfully. So she was trying and failing and ending up in the hospital because she went to a restaurant and she thought it was safe and it wasn't. And it was just a nightmare for her. And then she realized that there were people like her who were suffering in the same way, that they were getting sick, they were frustrated, they were not getting the help they need. And so she really started rebelling against the medical industry for not giving the right information to food allergy sufferers, the food industry for putting a lot of crap in food and even labeling it like gluten-free when it can still actually make people with food allergies sick. And she was rebelling against the isolation people who have food allergies feel because they can't go out to dinner, they can't go to their friend's house and enjoy a meal because it could make them sick. So her 3-word rebellion ended up being make food fun again, because that is exactly what she wants to do for people. She wants people to enjoy eating. She wants people to feel safe and secure in the choices that they make. And she wants them to have fun. Like, it shouldn't be such a drag to fuel your body. And so we came up with that like 4 years ago, and it's really now the center of her brand. And for food allergy sufferers, it's something that's really resonating.
I love that. That's cool. Thanks for sharing that. So it's been so awesome hearing about the 3-word rebellion, especially like your own journey in coming up with that. I think that's, it's really inspiring to hear that. And I'm going to go and do some free writing. I've downloaded your framework and I'm going to do a bunch of free writing and see what happens there. Because I've done a lot of my own message searching, but not with the goal of coming up with 3 words that I could, turn into that movement or, create a hashtag and really use it to market myself in my speaking. So this has been really helpful. Yeah.
Awesome.
Couple more questions. This one's not really related to the message, or maybe it is, but I know that you've worked with a lot of people and you've had a lot of experience in the communication and public speaking space. What do you see as being the worst advice being dispensed in this industry?
Oh, so many things. I'm like, what can I start with? One of the big problems I see is that people treat speaking like it's a checklist. And you see that a lot with the content is produced. 7 ways to give a great presentation. And then they just like list this fairly generic device, like, practice and, open this way, not that way. And it feels all the same. And at the same time, not all of that advice can fit a speaker, because speakers are diverse and we have our own uniqueness. And what works for one person, like opening with a story, yes, that can work really, really well if that is how you connect best with people. But if you know that you are not, like, you like to connect with people on the logic and the reasoning, opening with a story is terrible, terrible advice for you. You will actually fail at that. So for me, one of the things that has always stuck out to me, and something that I've taken forward in my business, is a Pablo Picasso quote. He says, to learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist. And when you know what the best practices are, you can start playing with those best practices and finding out what actually works for you. And for me, that is the most important piece of advice, because we are all so unique and all so different. And we should be showing up with our strengths and not just thinking, how many ums did I say? And oh man, I need to have a story. And oh, I have to make them laugh. And like all of that advice, you have to choose what is best for you and play to your strengths.
Absolutely. I love that. Was there a moment where you realized what your uniqueness was?
There was, and so there's a woman named Sally Hogshead, and she has.
I love her. She's
Oh,
great.
okay. Yes. And I remember the first time I took the How to Fascinate assessment. I was really, really surprised at what I got. Like, I was the Maverick leader, which is innovation and power. And in my mind, I did not think I was very creative. Like, I did not think I was a creative, innovative person. Like the power, I'm like, okay, yeah, I see that. Like, I do like to lead. I don't have a problem with it. But the creativity part really stood out. And I'm like, and so I started asking my friends, and I'm like, do you think I'm creative? And they're all like, yeah, that's a stupid question. And for me, I'm like, oh, that is something that I need to bring out in the work that I do, because I am very good at seeing patterns and combining ideas in different ways to come up with something new. And I think that is something that I bring to my work with my clients, is being able to take all of their ideas and get them to a point where they have something new and different to talk about. So that was totally eye-opening for me. And it definitely changed my company, because my company was called Relationally Speaking. Terrible name, but that's what it was called at the time. And then as I really started embracing my creativity, my innovation, and the power behind that, that's how I morphed my brand into Communication Rebel.
So cool. Yeah, I did that test as well. And my archetype was the rock star. And it was so fascinating because whenever I at the start of every podcast, I say, hey, rock star. Like, that's my address to everyone. And I write to my email list, to my followers, I'll write, hey, rock star. And people write back and say, hey, rock star, like back to me. And so when that came up, I was like, oh my God, I really am a rock star. Super cool.
I love it.
But yeah, I really love that test, and especially around the fact that it gives you that permission to be more of, what it tells you to, to be more of who you are. And I just love that. Michelle, can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you do with your clients? And if people, because you've shared so many cool things today on this podcast, if people want to learn more about you and the work you do, where can they go?
Yeah. So I live at drmichellemazur.com. And if you want to find out more about the 3-Word Rebellion, you can go to 3wordrebellion.com. And it doesn't matter if you spell out 3 or use the number 3, you land at the same place.
You've thought of everything. I'm impressed.
Yes.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, Dr. Michelle, thank you so much again for being so energetic, enthusiastic, and generous with your time. I'm sure everyone listening would have got a lot out of this. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. This has been fantastic.
Huge thank you to Dr. Michelle Mazur for sharing all her insights on the podcast with me and with you guys too. You can find out more about what she does at drmichellemazur.com or simply visit the show notes at thecmethod.com/Michelle. I'll also link up to where you can download her 3-Word Rebellion framework. I'll pop that in the show notes. Link is in the description of this podcast on your app. I've already started the free writing exercises in that framework, and I've been sharing it with my coaching clients too. They've been finding it really helpful, so you should definitely go download it. I'll keep you posted on how I go finding my own 3-Word Rebellion. I sort of feel like the name of this podcast is already a version of a 3-Word Rebellion, stand out, get noticed. Maybe it could be something more along the lines of speak up, stand out. Who knows? If you have any suggestions, I would love to hear them. That would be amazing. Anyway, as you go about your day, if you found this podcast valuable, if you found it insightful, then please do share it with a friend or a colleague who you think would also enjoy it. It's the best way to get this podcast out there and shared. You know, we're almost at 500,000 downloads. So exciting. I can't wait. We might even be there already. I'm not sure. I haven't checked today, but I will definitely let you know next week. Okay, it's time to get me and my horrible croaky voice out of here. Thank you for listening, for spending some time with me today, and keep on being awesome, Rockstar. I'm Christina Canters, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Stand Out, Get Noticed. To learn more and inquire about the C Method coaching, keynote, and corporate training programs, visit thecmethod.com.